Alex Ferguson, Group Managing Director at Lucion Group. Alex Ferguson is the Group Managing Director, having taken on the group role following the successful acquisition and integration of Delta Simons, where he was Managing Director for over 6 years. Alex is responsible for leading the managing directors of the group companies at executive board level. Lucion Group is a purpose-driven organisation dedicated to protecting people and the planet. It provides a comprehensive suite of scientific, environmental, health and safety consultancy services. Alex, great to be with you. Firstly, if you could just introduce us to Lucion Group and tell us a bit about what the company does and the sector in which you operate.
Sure. Well, Lucion Group offers inspection, assessment and advisory services in the environmental consulting field effectively. So there's a range of services going from testing and inspection of hazardous materials through site assessment and investigation into advisory, where we advise across a whole suite of environmental issues from contaminated land, hazardous materials, biodiversity, right through to ESG and safety and internal environment, which ties into well-being as well. So it's a good range of environmental services.
Alex, if you could just outline how Lucion Group can be instrumental at each stage of the building life cycle.
Sure. I guess the life cycle can be described as real estate planning, development and investment. So those are the key stages where we're involved in it. So from a planning perspective, there's the development master planning, there's the formal planning process, and there's also the master planning design where what does the eventual occupier want, what does the developer want, how do they want this development to operate, and how are they going to make sure that it covers off all of the environmental risks as we do so. So we will consider ground conditions, both from a contaminated status and physical constraints, geotechnical constraints, biodiversity and biodiversity net gain, habitat protection, right through to air and noise and other sides of things. Where development sites have got existing buildings, we look at hazardous materials in those buildings, asbestos and other materials, to ensure that they are safely removed without any risk to the wider environment. So, and going through that planning stage is key, and we have an environmental planning team that supports our clients through that. Through the construction phase, it's about setting the right brief, ensuring that environmental standards are part of all of that brief, and supporting our clients as they commission contractors, or in many cases the contractors are our clients, and we're helping them understand the brief of their client, the developer and occupier of the building, ensure that they are using materials properly, managing waste as appropriate, and taking them through that cycle, right down to carbon footprinting where required to do so. Once a building has been constructed, there's two routes there that we get involved in that. One is the occupier. So where people are occupying buildings, they need to look at how they manage the health and safety of their team, the environmental standards of the building, and so how that ties into well-being. And then from an investment side, our investment clients are looking at due diligence and ensuring that they understand the quality of their investment before they buy it. And they want to ensure that where needed, they've identified any improvements that need to be made in environmental standards. So we cover that through a due diligence process too.
And is there anything else driving the retrofitting market at the moment?
Well, the most topical conversation, both within the real estate sector and pretty much everywhere else, is energy efficiency and energy usage. So retrofitting to make buildings energy efficient is absolutely key for obvious reasons. As energy costs are climbing, it is making this a mainstream topic. For many years, the challenge has been trying to deal with those that don't see carbon, net zero, sustainability as a priority, but actually whatever your driver is, nobody wants to use more energy at the minute. And so, and also wants security of supply and needs to understand how they can control their costs. And so that really lends itself to efficient buildings, energy efficient buildings, and also renewable technology wherever possible, because it gives you that local control and that local market. So that will drive the retrofitting market. We're also, of course, in the aftermath of the of Grenfell, looking really hard at how that works too, and so that is also driving retrofit. But actually, now we've reached this stage, and it does pose an opportunity, because these buildings need to be looked at from a fire safety perspective, and it's the perfect timing to also look at them from a building efficiency and an energy efficiency perspective. And what Lucion brings to that table is we can look at everything through the hazardous materials side of things, which you need to obviously check before you start taking buildings apart, the environmental impacts of doing so from a air and a noise and air quality, noise issues, etc., general environmental elements, and right through to advice on waste management, waste disposal and circularity.
And are there any other ideas or innovations that you want to highlight in terms of improving sustainability within real estate? And perhaps you could sort of weave in the role that Lucion Group could play in that as well.
I can. I suppose the key thing that Lucion Group brings to the table is through its now ownership of Delta Simons, which we were acquired 18 months ago and now part of the group. Inogen is Lucion is a member of the Inogen Alliance, which is a global alliance of environmental consultancies. We have 76 member businesses across the world on every continent, and I guess what that means is we've got a fairly unique perspective as to what the trends are in other countries, what the innovations are, and what works there. And as we look at the temperatures that we've experienced this summer, and doubtless other changes to weather that we're going to see over the next few months, there are places around the world where that is their normal weather.
Yes.
And they've already adapted to do that. We mustn't feel as though we're on our own and need to start from the word go. So it gives us a real opportunity to bring our expertise from around the world and feed it into that UK marketplace and that European development cycle. There's an increasing level of investor knowledge.
Yeah.
There's an increasing number of people that are really thinking about where they put their investments, whether that's personal pensions, whether that's high net wealth individuals, and they're driving money into the green sector. And for every person that says they're no longer going to invest in oil and gas, they still have their money to invest. And so it narrows the field and actually drives money into a sector. I think there's a real opportunity for innovation and around sustainable and green products now.
So you mentioned sort of taking that global view. How do different regions around the world compare in terms of delivering different ESG goals in construction and the real estate sector?
I think Europe as a whole, and I mean sort of geographically rather than politically, does lead on this. And actually, in terms of the legislation that's driving this in the UK, it's still very much European led. We're working with the legislation we already have and developing from that stage of things. So I think Europe leads the world in terms of green innovation in buildings. There are other pockets as well, don't get me wrong. There's some fantastic buildings that have been built in Australia and Singapore and the US and all the rest of it. It's not unique to that, but it really is in terms of European, in terms of legislation, there's a real European drive to it. The EU taxonomy coming in now will create significant focus on this, and it will go beyond the EU in the same way that GDPR is. You know, it doesn't matter where your company's based, you still have had to act on GDPR in terms of data protection. The same will apply with the EU taxonomy. It will drive the sustainability into the entire real estate chain.
So where can we share some of those innovations and improve global standards, do you think?
I think across the sector there are forum after forum where people are working on it and talking around it. I think the key really is to get the investors to continue on that journey of really truly driving green investment. And where I see a disconnect at times is with the occupier market. So more than, I've called it a market, but actually it's just people that occupy buildings. They often, I don't know about you, but I get into a new car and just press a few buttons, and once it works I go. I don't necessarily read all the manuals. And the same applies with buildings. People take them on and they don't necessarily think about where they would perform best. And that is, there's a real gap in there, and we work with facilities management businesses that are working really hard to get on top of that. But I do think that there's a true opportunity for a very constructive feedback loop between occupiers saying this doesn't work for us, developers and contractors and construction contractors building that on and driving that improvement there. At the minute there's a bit of a disconnect. It's not universal, there's some great practice out there, right? But there's a bit of a disconnect between the people that build buildings are the people that occupy them, and they don't join across. And I think there's a real opportunity to build on those relationships to improve it.
And just very quickly before we end, let's look beyond the real estate and construction sector for a moment, and let's talk about how Lucion Group delivers services to corporate clients.
Of course. We're principally involved in that sector initially through EHS, so Environment, Health and Safety. So we're health and safety advisors for a lot of global tech companies in particular. But through our Energy Alliance colleagues, we will work with our client network to ensure that their teams are safe and that the highest standards are driven around the globe. And that is a real positive where big global tech businesses in particular have UK and US and European standards. They expect those standards to be met everywhere that they operate in the world. And so that does drive those standards there in health and safety. And actually, most health and safety managers have an E in the front of their title, so they're EHS. And environment has taken the back seat in many cases because it's important, but it's not as current as the people in the office needing to be safe tends to take the priority. So there's an opportunity using that network to really improve the way we operate environmentally. So that's the first side of things. We're quite specifically now involved with a range of businesses, helping them with their ESG, environment, social governance strategies, helping them through their materiality assessments, helping them decide what's important to them, as much as we said with the real estate assessment earlier. But it's very much about trying to help them identify what their priorities are, and as much as anything engage the rest of their team, because it's all very well a boardroom making a statement. If it doesn't travel beyond the boardroom, then it may as well not have been said. And there's a real drive to try and put that through. So we're seeing whole ranges of initiatives that are some on a very local level, I think volunteering days and things like that, but and that has a real place, and particularly where it drives the right behaviour across and you can influence others to do that. So we're helping a range of clients do that. We're helping them move towards accreditations for those sorts of things. We're looking at where we can help make improvements, where we can document things that have already been done, and ultimately one of the main drivers is to try and be the right sort of business for people to come and work. And I think that the businesses that are driving in diversity are bringing in the best range of talent. They're bringing in the best new ideas, and in itself that sort of perpetuates a real progressive move towards better ESG performance. So I think we enjoy that side of the work. It's great to be able to talk to people about their businesses because they're passionate about it, and there's no one that doesn't want to improve their business. And ultimately, sustainable business is good business. That whole you run a good business and then you throw some money at sustainability thing has gone now. It's widely recognised that a business that performs well on sustainability performs well on every level as well. So the metrics all tie together. There's very few businesses that will truly end up with long-term financial success if they're not having long-term ESG success as well. And that's increasingly recognised around the boardroom, around the C-suite, around senior teams, and we're working with clients to help them accelerate that.
So much food for thought there, Alex.
Thank you.
Really, really fascinating and extremely topical conversation.
Thank
Alex,
you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.